All right, good evening, everyone. Sorry, very loud. All right, welcome to our joint meeting with the Issaquah School District, and it'll be followed by our regular meeting. I will have our city clerk start with our roll call for everyone.
Mayor Kelly Clark,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Karen Howe,
Barely here.
Councilmember Amy Lamb,
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen,
Present.
Councilmember Sid Gupta, Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell,
Fully here.
Board Member AJ Taylor,
Here.
Board Member Marnie Meraldo, Board Member Harlan Gallinger,
Here.
Board Member Sidney Mullings, and Board Member Matt Coyne.
Here.
Thank you.
Marnie is on, okay, Marnie is on her way. All right, let's start with Pledge Allegiance. I'll lead us. All right, does anyone have the land acknowledgement pulled up? Looking at Councilmember Gupta. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Great, thank you so much. All right, first up, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, I think we have 7 of us here, right? Yeah, all right. Okay, that is approved. So let's kick off our joint meeting. We're going to start with introductions. So if you all can, well, first make sure you're speaking into the microphone so online and TV can hear you. So we'll go around the room, probably start with Councilmember Gupta, if that's okay. Introduce yourself, kind of how you got elected or what you, like what your passion is behind. Why are you here today, basically, for each member? And we'll just go all the way around, and then if you both will introduce yourselves. Yes, go ahead.
And Mayor, really quickly, if I may, just a reminder, turn the button on so that it goes green at the base and lean in a little bit so we make sure to pick it up on the recording for those that are not in the room. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sid Gupta. I am a native plant steward and spent several years doing restoration work in and around Sammamish. Spent 8 years on the city's Parks and Recreation Commission and was elected this past November. Very excited to be here.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm AJ Taylor. Newly elected, well, in November, but sworn into the school board in December. So learning as I go. I live in Issaquah up in Cougar Mountain, and I've been a volunteer in the community for quite some time, working on education issues, and particularly was really interested in school funding issues, and that's what motivated me to run.
Thank you, AJ. Kent Treen is on my second term, and I ran to help protect the environment, and then like Sid Gupta, Councilmember Gupta, I've been a Sammamish steward since I moved to the city. And then I'm also an educator, so I'm been working a program for at-risk students for the last 12 years in the Bellevue School District. Thank you.
I'm Karen Howe, and I'm deputy mayor here, and this is my 3rd year, and I think it's dog years is how we look at this. It's been a tremendous opportunity. I really enjoy working on the council and didn't know I would love it. I ran 3 times and finally was successful in my 3rd time, and I just wore people down, is how that worked. But the reason why I ran is the same that I would continue, the same reason why I get up in the morning and come to work, which is to figure out, is there a better way to do something, and is there a good way to put something together that could last into the future. So like Kent and Sid, plant steward, but I also have a lot of time with kids. So I'm a CASA, court-appointed advocate for kids in the foster care system. So what you're going to be speaking to today really touches certainly the work that I do as a volunteer.
Harlan Gallinger, I'm in my 9th year I am a proud resident of Sammamish, live just between Pine Lake and Beaver Lake. I started this work when I had preschooler here and was really passionate about early learning, passionate about equitable access to high quality education, of which our district really prides itself on delivering. As my kids have grown, my interests have grown with them and now encompass sort of what our work is in secondary, and especially for my day job as an emergency physician is our youth mental health crisis. And what is the intersection between what we do in our educational system, what we do in the city, and then how we can best serve students and families across our community. And so I currently have a 7th grader at Pine Lake Middle School and a 10th grader at Skyline.
All right, hello everyone, Kaylee Clark. So same with Karen and Amy, we all got elected at the same time. So this is, what is this, our 3rd year? Yeah, that is weird. So I was relatively new to the community, looked at what was on the council then and really thought I could add to kind of a different background, worked pretty much public and government basically my whole career. So 10, 11, probably almost 12 years now. So I was screaming at the Rain game on Sunday, so this is not sick. This is just me screaming. The ref was really annoying, but really glad to be here. Love serving the community and really love being a part of this. And yeah, thank you, Issaquah, for kind of making this meeting happen.
Great. My name is Heather Tauyik. I'm serving in my 2nd year as a superintendent in Issaquah School District. And I got into this work initially as a classroom teacher, as a middle school English language arts and social studies teacher in New York City in the South Bronx. But I've had several different turns in different ways in government, nonprofit consulting, and some different business management adventures. So very proud to be serving, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing and eager to be here and really honored that you're hosting us tonight. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Roisin O'Farrell. I've been on City Council since this November, but was appointed back in 22 when we had some vacancies. I came up through the commissions. I was in Planning Commission for 3 years, so I found that a really rewarding experience. I'm really interested in becoming more connected to the city where I was not born and raised, but where I hope to remain a resident of, and so really interested in continuing to get to know the community and serve as best as I can and be of use. That's me.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Matt Coyne. I have been on the Issaquah School Board for 6 months now, but like Karen said, it does already feel like dog years. It goes by very fast. And I will say, too, it can relate to the point Karen made, too, around running for this position. I knew it would be fun, but I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would. So that's definitely a positive. More about me. So longtime resident of Sammamish. Another interesting factoid is my wife's family was one of the original homesteaders. Not really, joking. She actually grew up here in Sammamish. On the other side of Sammamish, she graduated from Eastlake High School. But again, we've lived here for many years. My involvement in the Issaquah schools started when my oldest, who is now a junior at Skyline, when he started kindergarten, I got involved with the Issaquah Schools Foundation. Was on the Issaquah Schools Foundation board for many years, was board president for a couple of years. And so that really put me on a track supporting education, supporting public schools. I have come from a family of teachers. My parents are both retired public school teachers. My wife's a teacher. So have a lot of compassion and admiration for the teaching profession as well. In addition to my son, who's at Skyline, I have a daughter at Pine Lake Middle School. And again, it's wonderful to be here to connect with my city, the city of Sammamish. So thank you again.
Hi, Pam Stewart. If we're counting in dog years, I've been on the council for 40 years, so that's a scary thought. But no, I was first elected in 2017, served a term. I was then appointed back to the council and then ran for re-election last year. So in the early stages of my second elected term. I first ran to get more involved to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable city. I've been here in the city of Sammamish for 21 plus years, raised both my kids. My youngest is a senior at Eastlake, so time is accelerating for the next 3.5 weeks. And I first got involved in the community when we first moved here, and my oldest was in preschool, and I was the PTA president at the preschool, and have done a number of things. Most interestingly, probably the chief umpire for Eastlake Little League for a year on the Eastlake Little League board, and an instructor for Taekwondo are probably the most interesting community involvements that I've had until I got into politics, which some might argue is a blood sport. So I prefer the low contact Taekwondo, but thank you.
I'm Amy Lamb, and this is my third year on council. I have lived in Sammamish for coming up on 30 years, and my kids went through the Issaquah School District. They're young adults now. I ran for council on the whole idea of representation. There was no Asian Americans on council, and I'm super proud to represent the Asian American community. Climate is really important to me, and I'm super happy that we passed our climate action plan, as well as housing and equity. My day job is with the Washington State Department of Health. My background is in graphic design, and so I manage a team of designers there. And I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Good evening, Scott McCall. I have the honor of being city manager here, a little over 2 years in that position, and I'm really proud to be part of this community. It's a great community. It's great to have the school board here from Issaquah to talk about joint issues in the community. I know there are a lot of things that overlap from one to the next, and anything we can do to try to provide assets to the community and make things better, that's what we're here to do. We have a great staff here at the city, and we are happy to engage and be part of the process.
Thank you. I'm Martin Turney. I'm the Chief of Finance and Operations for the Issaquah School District, and I've been in this position for 2 years. Been with the school district for about 15. So excited to be here and sharing some information with you tonight.
Tom Mullins, Director of Capital Projects at the Issaquah School District. Been in the position about 5 years, been with the district 25.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Is there anyone else to introduce? Oh, okay. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Shereen Carver, Executive Director of Special Services.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Martin, I think you are up first. So the first presentation is from Issaquah School District, enrollment and new high school update. And our city clerk will get us rolling here.
Okay, great. Can you advance the slide, please? Great. So thank you for having us again. Purpose tonight is to discuss our current high school enrollment in the Issaquah School District, explore some of the relationships between facility capacity and constraints on innovative program offerings, and then to provide an update on the new high school project. Next slide. Wanted to start with just kind of showing that visual representation of our students who live within the city boundaries here. So quite a few, 38% of students within the city. You'll notice we have some that are on the south end there, or my directional skills may be off, but they also feed into Cedar Trail, so schools that are within your boundaries as well. So just wanted to show you that. Next slide. Getting into the enrollment, these are our district level projections. I think it's no surprise that we've been declining slightly over the last few years. We had a large jump right in the COVID years, and then we've been kind of looking at an immediate slow decline over the next few years as a district. But we are cautiously optimistic that that's going to start to trend up over time. So that's kind of the district-wide look at our enrollment. Next slide, please. Wanted to show kind of what the historical high school enrollments look like. So this actually goes back to 2014, and when we were as a district having conversations about capacity at our high schools. And so that's when we began the conversations about a 2016 bond. And if you notice, our 3 high school enrollment levels have increased since then. And so we were still increasing at the high school level. If you skip to the next slide. Want to show you that we are kind of peaking right now. So we are at a very high level where our schools are fairly packed, in particular Skyline and Issaquah High. Now, as some of the enrollment declines through the elementary start to work their way through our system, we will likely see a trough here in a few years where we will see some decline. However, again, just like the district trend, we expect that to pick back up. And one of the important things for us to note is that even when we will likely see that trough here in a few years, it's not going to decline to a level where we were having conversations back, like I said, about 10 years ago. So we expect that there's still going to be capacity issues at those schools. So that's what we are trying to plan for as a district. Next slide. Just to kind of reinforce, we have Skyline and Issaquah up here compared to other high schools in the state. Skyline, just the size-wise, coming in around 4th, and Skyline's 12th, Issaquah High 4th. So again, reinforcing that we have a lot of students in these buildings, and they were, really meant to be optimized at an enrollment level quite less than that. Next slide. So a consequence of that, we have students in portables. So again, just to let you see what that looks like, we've got about 725 classrooms in just Issaquah High School and Skyline High School. To just kind of isolate that number. Again, we like to alleviate that and have students in buildings and making sure that we're using our spaces optimally. Always nice to show some pictures if you haven't been in the school. Skyline across the way there. This is kind of what it looks like in some of the assembly times during the day in the common area. If you skip to the next page there, some of the transition periods and the drop-off pickup. If you do ever have a chance to go check it out, lunchtime can be very interesting, and it really, that facility wasn't necessarily built to move that many students through the lunchroom like that. So again, feeling the capacity issues both at Issaquah High and Skyline, but this kind of gives you that visual. Next slide. Now, in the Issaquah School District, we're looking to kind of go great to greater in terms of innovation, right? And so what we're hoping to accomplish to accelerate through innovation, to engage all students in real-world experiences, to deliver on greater choice and access for all students, and to foster agency and purpose. And so what we're going to do here is kind of show you the tie-in to space in our facilities, and being over capacity really is a hindrance to that. If you can go to the next slide. So overcrowding in our schools, obviously that impacts us, but how does this impact our ability to provide innovative offerings? Classrooms are set up to maximize space for capacity rather than optimizing the environment for engagement. Limited space may impact the ability to implement innovative pedagogies, if I said that right, thank you. All right, such as project-based or problem-based learning. Support spaces have been repurposed to add more capacity. Access to larger spaces for collaborative learning, such as commons, theater, hallways, or outdoor areas may be restricted due to the need for increased student management and structure. And that was kind of what we were looking at when we just saw those pictures up. So obviously those are hindrances. Next slide. How can reducing overcrowding support innovation? So we can enhance career preparation spaces and programs across district high schools to resemble real-world work environments. We can reconfigure layouts in existing classrooms to create more collaborative and creative learning environments that are accessible and engaging. Use spaces for their intended purposes that have been repurposed due to overcrowding. Add maker spaces or collaboration spaces for more problem-based learning. Examples there listed. So that's how we will be able to take advantage of these spaces for innovation. Now, in terms of the new high school project, just wanted to give you a couple of visuals if you haven't seen these before. This is a top-down look. I'm not sure what direction that is, Tom. Is it looking southwest? Okay. And this is another view. Okay. Give you an idea of where we are with this project. In terms of permits, the land use permit's ready for us to pick up. Building permit in process. So we are, if you've followed along with this project over time, you know that at different stages we may or may not have had those permits. So right now we're at a stage where we are essentially ready to do this. Next slide. Of course, we have some funding complications. We will need additional funding to commence the new high school project. Districts have been planning for a potential bond authorization be placed on the November 5th, 2024 ballots. And in a couple days at the board meeting, that will bond resolution will be looked at by our board and discussed for that potential. And any questions for us?
Yeah, how did these work? Apparently, that's a big question. So my first question just has to do with your statistics. I'm just curious, why do you think enrollment is going to go up? You think it's going to go up?
Sure.
But why?
Yeah. Well, we've done a couple of different demographer studies. So we believe that there is the decline that's happening primarily at our elementary schools that will pick up in the secondaries. We seem to have a trend in our district where we pick up students at the high school in particular, possibly because students go through private school or they have other options before they get to the high schools. Also potential that because of the housing market or barriers to buy into the community, people wait until their students are older. So in terms of the high school, we believe that there's still desire for folks to move to this community. We may be seeing a temporary dip, and then once the elementary numbers start to rebound, that'll start cycling through later on as well.
And my second question has to do just with the structure itself. I can't really tell from your imagery, but are you planning to go up as high as you can versus out?
Yeah, the current design has us at 3 stories, which maximizes the height limit we can go in Issaquah for that zoning.
Anyone else? Just had a quick question. Yeah, go for it.
So I just had a quick question about the numbers and about the student rate. So even when you were talking about the little dip that we're going to experience, you're still concerned about the overcrowding at the high school level?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the new high school, then that would help draw new students. Would that have, what kind of an effect would that have, for example, on Skyline? When we build the new school at Providence Point, will we see a dramatic reduction in the number of students at the Skyline campus, would you say?
We're pulling 600. Yeah, likely 600 to 700 students pulled out of Skyline and Issaquah High to populate that new school. Yeah.
That would be each?
Yeah, permanently.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you.
So similar to Deputy Mayor Howe's question, I guess I have a different one is, do we know why the enrollments went down?
Well, we don't know every answer to that question. I think that in King County alone, we just saw an across-the-board reduction in population. So folks moved out of the county, folks moved out of the state. We are in a similar situation as our neighboring districts. So the Bellevues, the Lake Washingtons, we all saw a very similar decline in the 2 years, the most dramatic 2 years of that time frame. Yep.
Right. And then did you say that elementary school enrollments are increasing or they're anticipated to increase?
They are anticipated to increase in later years. So right now we're seeing a fairly steady over the last couple years, steady in terms of predictable. So we were able to had a fairly well predicted kindergarten class coming in. We know what our classes currently in the system are, and we aren't necessarily losing students because of that. That's not the trend in our district. So we are looking at birth rates that started to flatten out in the last 2 years. So most of this is pretty tentative, and we're going to do our projections every year to see if this is maintaining. But right now, like I said, we're optimistic that the birth rates are going to stabilize, and we're going to return to picking up a little bit more than just the birth rate amounts.
Got it. And then you kind of touched on it, the cost of living. So if there's data that you guys could share afterwards, I would love to see data around how maybe families can't move to this area until their children are older. So we see it isn't necessarily that sort of steady growth of like our kids go to elementary school, middle, and then high school. There's kind of a jump there. I'd love to see the data around that. I think that for me, that's one of the big concerns, right, is that young families can't afford to live around here. And then not necessarily at the moment, but I do think the other thing we all need to talk about is when we open these schools, and we're going to need more teachers and administrators and counselors, and where are they going to live? Because they're not going to be able to afford to live around here either. And do you have questions, concerns, programs around those things that we should jointly talk about to make sure we can support all of those wonderful young people who want to go to school here? Thanks.
Yeah, I want to reinforce what you said, Councilmember Stewart. Our loss of students was at elementary primarily. We lost 1,800 students during COVID. And I think it is an affordability thing at this point for why young families can't afford to live here. By the time their kids get to be secondary age with middle and high school, we see that sustained enrollment. And so even the mild dip that they show forecasting is still higher than where we were in 2014 when we were planning for this bond initially. And so, but also just as a reminder, the students and teachers are already here in our district. This is literally trying to build a building for what's already here. And so yes, there will be growth eventually. We see that. But for what's already here, we just move them to a place where they can actually thrive. And right now they're like sardines, and it's really hard for them to have effective programming and for us to know each student by name, strength, and need, which is really our goal.
That's great clarification. Appreciate that.
So is the normal capacity like 1,800? Is that for Skyline? Okay, so like the 400 or whatever is what you're over, but you'd like to have it around 18?
Yeah, so I would say, and Tom, you correct me, it's about the kind of optimal use of the building. So there are certain levels you can house students and have them within the building, and you can mitigate it with some portables. But to get to optimal use, yeah, it's closer to 1,800 students at the building.
So you mentioned 600 to 700 students pulled out of Skyline and ISD, or Issaquah High School. The goal then would be to take those students out of the portables, out of those two buildings, and ideally move them to this new Providence Point High School. Is that correct?
Correct. We do retain the portables usually because we want to have flexibility, and we never know what you can use those spaces for. So we don't necessarily get rid of the portables if we have some innovative programs we want to house there. But the need to have students in those spaces, we would like to remove that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Howe, and then Marty, I can have you introduce yourself after this topic, if that works. Yeah.
And one question has to do with bonding. If you go out for it in this year, it would be a significant bond, I would imagine. How long can you hang on to those funds? Because if you run into headwinds with capital infrastructure costs, I'm just curious as to, can you hang on to that for a period of time? Are there restrictions about how long you can hold on to a bond without implementing all of it?
Sure. So we would likely sell bonds in chunks. So within maybe 4 different, if the bond's authorized, we would sell them with probably 4 consecutive years. And then there's typically around a 6-year window where you're optimally using those funds. And so obviously if you're kind of staggering those, you have a longer window to use some of those funds. Now, with a project like this, we would want to get started right away and begin spending those funds, and hopefully we wouldn't run into an issue where we were holding on to those too long. If you do, you have some some arbitrage considerations and things you need to do to report that. But again, I think in a project like this, we want to get started, have most of that spent within, it's going to take it's a 2-year runway to get the school built, and then you have those funds spent within the 2 to 3 years. There's usually some lag on spending some of the funds, but that would be it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm so sorry that I'm late. Apparently there are 2 major lights out in Issaquah coming up here, so my commute was over an hour from Newcastle. Marty Moraldo, I've been on the Issaquah School Board. This is my 15th year, and I remember the last time we talked about a bond for this high school.
Awesome, glad you made it. Yeah. How many zeros are we talking about after this number? Like million zeros, billion zeros? For this bond, yeah.
Oh, the bond itself, well, it is under consideration still, so we have a board meeting in a couple days, but right now the number is $642,345,000. And it includes many, many things. So a lot of it is building modernization, efficiency, Clean Buildings Act, which we need to comply with. So that's going to be very important for us to have funds for. Safety and security, that's one of the top things that folks in our community, value. It's a priority. We also have some play spaces and other areas that we want to reconfigure for optimal use and inclusive space. So there's many things on the list beyond the high school, and it is time for us to take good care of our buildings. It's one of those things that when you have good operational, or when you have good buildings, it eases the burden on the general fund, and we can maximize our dollars for the classroom. Yeah.
So $640+ million is a significant bond request. Was there consideration to remodeling or adding on to Skyline, Issaquah, and Liberty?
Yeah, do you want to take that?
The issue with adding on to Issaquah High or Skyline or Liberty, in particular Issaquah High and Skyline, is traffic on Second, and all you do is increase those high schools to even make them larger. The common spaces, those kind of spaces, weren't built for 2,500 to 3,000 kids, so you tend to exacerbate the issue by adding on to those campuses. And Skyline's fairly maxed out right now, as is Issaquah High for land.
There's parking lots on Skyline. I bring that up. Did the architects look at those buildings and determine that it's not advisable to expand those high schools? Because if we're looking at a capacity issue of 600 and you divide it up among the high schools, you're looking at adding about 200 per high school. And so I don't see that as like a huge issue to expand these schools by those amounts to accommodate.
So to clarify, it's 600 to 700 per high school. So it's 1,400 students that are housed. And to get to your point, Councilmember Gupta, if we're going to do efforts to have our buildings for safe and secure buildings, for example, vestibules to enter each of our high schools, that doesn't benefit any of the students who are in portables, of which are hundreds each day. So safety and security is a priority for our community. And so in order to do that, they need to be in a building. So you could build a building to house 5,000 students. But what we care about in this district is our pursuit of academic excellence. We think we've demonstrated that. And part of that is being able to have a right-sized population within a building to be able to serve them in the way that we believe will provide them a world-class education. We don't think we can do that in a building of 3,000 students. I don't think that many districts can in our state.
Is it 600? I was just looking at the numbers yesterday in your capital plans, and I thought I saw 600 overall in the district for the high schools and not 600 per high school. Am I incorrect?
Yeah. Incorrect, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 600 to 700 per high school.
Okay. How much state funding are you guys getting for high school number 4?
So right now, the estimate, I believe, was it 4.1 or 4.5 million that we anticipate. That can change a little bit as we go through the process. So it's considering the size of the project, not a whole lot of money, but it is what we expect at this point.
Yeah, that isn't very much out of 650 million. I think the spaces are really innovative, automotive spaces. Where's the operating costs going to come from once these spaces are built? I mean, you'll have to buy equipment and tools.
Sure. So we do have some equipment consideration in the bond itself. And then, as was mentioned before, so the teaching and some of the labor costs are already there. It's about how we use them and where we situate students and staff in those spaces, and they're able to take advantage of what's available. So.
Okay. And we had this conversation before because I was at the last bond meeting, and my question was on the interest rates, and that I did not see the interest rates in your spreadsheet of the $650 million breakout, and that the interest rate for transparency, the residents need to see that it's actually not 650 million, but it's 650 million plus interest rates. And with interest rates being at 6% right now, that is a significant number.
Yeah, and a very important point. So much like a home loan, we as a district will be going out and issuing debt. There's an interest cost to that. It's hard for us to say at this point until we're ready to actually sell the bonds. The bond market has been in a pretty favorable place. It's not quite, analogous to the home market in terms of interest rates. So again, we wouldn't know exactly until we go out. I do have a slide maybe I can share with you later that kind of shows the history and where we are currently in the bond market. We traditionally have done very well as a district because we have a favorable rating and we can piggyback with the state's program, the guarantee program. So we often are able to get a lower rate than many other districts and organizations. So you're absolutely right that it's not just the 642 million. There is interest on that debt, and we factor that in when we project the potential rate, the tax rate. So when we have our charts that project those tax rates out, that is part of what we're projecting out.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of debt, you currently owe. There's still outstanding voted debt in past years of 637 million. So if you add that to the 650, Issaquah School District will be carrying over $1 billion in debt. And is that typical of school districts around the country to be carrying that kind of debt?
Yeah, so I can't confirm the number of existing debt, but that sounds about right. I would say that it is typical, especially with our neighbors. You have Lake Washington, I believe, is in a similar spot. Some utilize different mechanisms, levies versus bonds, but it's not unheard of, especially in a district our size when we have an operating budget of $400 million, that long-term debt of up to 20 years. We are well within our limitation of debt, even if we were to issue these bonds, so that's not uncommon.
Okay.
Yep.
You guys mentioned in your slides from the bond meeting, and you pointed out Tacoma and Edmonds, and that their bond requests passed in February. In Tacoma, it was 650 million, similar. And in Edmonds, it was 595 million, which is also similar. But in Tacoma, they have 10,000 more students. And when we take a look at the student population, that comes out to, in Issaquah, 35,000 per student would be the 650 million. Versus Tacoma, you're looking at 23,000 per student. In Edmonds, it's 29,000 per student. So the differences are significant, and can you help me understand why we wouldn't be going out for a bond that is, say, equivalent to Tacoma of 23,000? Why we're asking for 35,000?
Yeah, so, bonds are important because this is how we finance our projects, but it's really about value. And if you survey all the people who live in South Sammamish, what's the number reason why they move here? They move here for the schools. So number one reason they move to Tacoma is not for the schools. So to have us compare that to is probably not a relevant comparison. That'd be an apples to oranges comparison. So we are representative of our community and what our community needs. That's what the 5 of us here are elected to do, in the same way that 7 of you are elected to do. And so we have a very clear indication from our community that education continues to be the value that they care about the most. And they want to continue to invest in that. We are, by many measures, the best school district in the state. And in order to continue those investments to keep that position and keep people moving here, that requires these investments. So I think to compare us to Tacoma, which is near and dear to my heart because that's where I work, would probably not be relevant in this situation.
And would you say the same thing for Edmonds then?
I would.
Okay.
I do just want to also mention we have 4 minutes and 2 more presentations. I know we have, this is definitely, I mean, you can definitely keep going too. I don't know if, because the other 2 are like student well-being and youth mental health. So something very important that I would love to get to. So I don't know.
I just have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the median income or the median housing cost is $1.5 million, which would be about $400 increase per household. And for some households, it might be, a significant amount in addition to all the other bonds that may be coming up to vote or have been approved. So my kids went through the Issaquah School District, and they had a great education, and they're successful, productive young adults because they did go through the Issaquah School District. But I am concerned about the costs. I'm concerned that, did we really look at the remodeling or additions onto the other schools? And again, like I said, I do support the idea of innovative thinking and the students here. I just am very concerned about the cost of, and especially with inflation and all the other costs that our residents will be bearing to pay this additional bond request.
We are incredibly concerned about the costs as well. We also have to consider the cost of not doing it right now. And so right now we're at where we are is because of the 5 years it took to get the permit. That cost for that project ballooned. It more than doubled. And so there are lots of reasons why that permit was delayed, and we don't need to enumerate them now. But this is why it matters, because if we do kick this can further down the road, the cost doesn't go down, the cost continues to go up. So yes, for about $1 a day, we're asking our residents across the district to support investing in their schools. And we know it's a heavy lift. We do not minimize that, and we do not try and pretend that it's not a big request. Our question back is, if not now, when, and then what would the cost be? So the cost will just continue to escalate, and that is our bigger concern, and that's the balance we're trying to strike.
All right, so I know we have a couple other, so we do have 1 minute, and then this meeting is over, so.
Well, I'm hoping that we get into it with the other presentations, but in addition to just space for students, and someone mentioned it before, but one of the keys to student well-being is the ability for teachers and administrators to actually know students. It's my understanding that when there's a level of anonymity, student behavior is not as good. And then also opportunities, right? When you have a school that's 3,000 large, you don't have 2 drama programs, you still just have 1. So you limit the opportunities that kids have to be engaged in things. So I'm hoping when you guys talk about student well-being, are those things that you'll touch on? Sort of what else is involved in having additional schools other than just a building?
Okay, so I don't know if we want to skip the city presentation and give 5 extra minutes just to this meeting to breeze through this.
Well, Mayor, if I may, council could
Yeah.
choose to extend this portion of the meeting
Yeah.
and start the regular business meeting a little bit later, if that's the will of the group. Because
And
I
you do have a meeting after this, right? We're okay. Yeah, that's what I was like, if we still have 2 extra presentations, how long do you think that both of these will
I
be?
make a motion that we extend the meeting for a half an hour.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, if I may, for those listening online, the regular business meeting is now scheduled to start at 6:45 p.m. for those that are interested in that portion of the program.
All righty, so our next presentation is on student well-being. And Heather, are you kicking this off?
Yes, I'll be kicking us off and sharing some highlights and then asking Shireen Carver to join in and add anything in details, and we'll open up for some discussion. Our first slide here just sets the groundwork for why student well-being is so important. And if you can scroll up to this slide on vision and mission and strategy, our board adopted a vision statement last year with the support of the community, with hundreds of vision statements that were developed and proposed. And this is the focus that sort of is architecture and sort of North Star for all of the work that we do. So all of our students thrive as they engage in meaningful learning that unlocks their passion and potential to positively impact the world. And all of these words have very deliberate meaning, in particular noting thrive in the context of this conversation and presentation. The rest are our board goals and the mission of the organization as defined by the board. And we have a strategic plan that helps support the how we achieve that overall. And there's a very explicit priority that is the first priority in our strategic plan on student well-being. And Shireen Carver is the leader and facilitator of that across the district on behalf of many individuals who contribute. And so that's why she's here tonight to complement this presentation and information sharing. But in particular, I want to say we want to make sure our students feel safe and have a sense of belonging, and that they have access to the resources that meet their needs. And that's how we make sure that they are thriving and to access learning. We do all of our work, both in terms of academic and student well-being, through the lens of multi-tiered systems of support. And the theory of that basically is that every kid gets what they need. But in particular, if we are making sure that we're designing and preparing our lessons and our opportunities to enable every student to participate, that we are planning with every student's diverse interest, passion, talents, and abilities in mind. So that's really what that is. And that's a well-documented framework to accelerate students' learning on both the well-being and the academic side. We can move to the next slide. So when we think about these tiers, tier 1 is meant for everyone. So everyone should be able to access all of these kinds of supports to help them thrive. So we have social emotional learning curriculum. Specifically at the elementary school, we use Second Step. For example, at the high school, we are driving our social emotional well-being through content. So this past year, our teachers have been focusing on self-awareness and self-management, which are very important skills to have in the world. And that we find that's best at the high school level because it's relevant to their learning, it's relevant to the content, and that can be reinforced through multiple subject areas and courses. We have a focus on family engagement in multiple ways where we are ensuring our families are engaged in partnership with the learning and well-being of all of our students. We have counselors across all of the districts serving all of our schools. And I'll just share a couple details through all of these as I go through. Our comprehensive counseling program, and we put these links here deliberately so people that are seeing this presentation online can click on those links to our website and see the kinds of resources that we do have. Universal screening allows us to assess any risk factors that might exist for all of our students, and we have a really robust screening process overall that helps our teachers and our staff at our schools know if there are any things that we need to follow up on. We tackle suicide prevention by providing training. We launched this year Care Solace, which is a program that basically helps match individuals with service providers. So a school district can't do it alone. We also know that there's a lack of supply in our communities and the ecosystem for mental and behavioral and substance abuse health supports. And so this service helps actually reduce the number of hours and attempts it can take for an individual to try and access care in a timely fashion. If you have to make calls to 5 different providers and you can't get seen for a month, 2 months, it actually decreases the likelihood that you will actually get the care that you need, and that can not help alleviate or address the potential problem that you're seeking to get help with. So this program helps reduce those barriers, and we have saved our community hours in their attempts to try and access care, and we've had over 200 appointments that have been made as a result of this. And that's available to all our student staff and their families. We have a school-based mental health partnership with Swedish Medical Mental Health, and that helps provide care in a place-based manner within our schools. And we do constant training with youth mental health. So how do you look for and how do you triage? And that's available to all of our different support and teaching staff. Shireen, what would you add as any details to this in terms of some of the things that we've been doing and sort of how we look at it comprehensively?
I think you provided a well-rounded summary. I think the additional piece is when we talk about the multi-tiered systems of support is that really intentional component of the integrated approach, supporting students' social, emotional, mental health along with that academic intervention base. I think the other pieces, in addition to the key components of our strategic plan, so having foundational components supporting as well as mental health, but also basic needs for our students.
Thank you. The next slide talks about our tiered supports and where we might need to see additional effort, resource allocation overall. And we see this across the board. And as Director Gallinger mentioned earlier, early learning was a passion for him as he thought about becoming part of our school board and representing our community. And we know that that's a critical component, that early learning foundational opportunity for our youth to have peer-based learning as well as access to social, emotional, and academic literacy and numeracy specifically can help accelerate a child's future trajectory as they enter the school system, and also help them build those skills that are required for collaboration and ongoing work within a classroom. We have very specific and focused family engagement efforts as well that help focus on the various ways we work with our families through special services, through seeking additional care, and being able to focus also on many of our families that might be new arrivals to our district and who might have a need to further learn about how to access in their first and primary language, and that is also culturally responsive. We have many organizational relationships and have sought to do more of that work because, as I said, a school district cannot do it alone. And so by creating partnerships that helps us more quickly identify where resources can be matched, but also share information about what we're seeing within the needs of our student population that can then also help others serve on our behalf. We focus on many of our, and actually maybe I'll turn to Shireen for a moment to talk about some of our special services and specially designed instruction, because these are also aspects for where we support our students.
Yeah, I just wanted to loop back to President Gallinger had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation about the national youth mental health crisis. And we're seeing that absolute connection when we think about how we're serving students that receive special education services or students that are receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 supports, and really thinking deeply about the really complex social, emotional, behavioral needs of our students right now, and as a system, how we need to be responsive to those needs. And so we've been very systematically layering in supports very intentionally, including adding social workers to our, both on the general education side of the house as well as the special education side of the house, board certified behavior analysts, adding in counseling services, both through our Swedish mental health partners, but also as components of students' individualized education plans. Really being thoughtful and intentional that in order for students to fully and robustly access our academic programming, that they need to be able to enter into that place of being safe, have belonging, their identities affirmed, and really, have those access to basic services and social emotional learning.
Great, thank you. And we also have a district crisis committee that helps us in the situations where we need the most reactive support, and we have protocols and supports that get activated through that process as well. I will say to sort of answer the question that Councilmember Stewart raised around what else goes into social emotional well-being, which is the ability for our students to access the kind of programming that allows them to spark new interest, to gain the confidence and competence to be able to pursue something that they might not have been exposed to previously, or that they have a particular unique interest and talent for. And all of those things we know help with engagement across the board. When a student feels great about themselves, when they feel like they can push through challenge and be resilient, when they feel like they have all the kinds of things that help them support their own passion and also meet their basic needs, they will thrive. And so we know it takes many different things to help our youth, and we're working at that from all fronts, as well as providing these specific supports. At this point, we're open to any questions, comments, reflections.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is something that rings really true to me on a personal level. I spent many a day in an IEP meeting, probably for about 16 years. And Sheree, I remember you very well from the ACT program. And my son's experience with the ACT program was phenomenal. And thank you so much for that. IEP meetings are an incredibly stressful and emotional place to be. And I think back, my very first IEP meeting was when my kid was in preschool in Discovery Elementary. And these really aren't questions, just really comments from a personal experience, that when you go into the room and you're sitting there, usually I was there by myself because my husband would travel, and you're there by yourself in a room filled with teachers, which was great, and professionals, but it felt very it was a very lonely place to be and a very emotional place to be. And I just wonder, going forward, how those particular meetings could be made feel more collaborative, more welcoming, and that you didn't feel like, as a parent, that you had to defend your position, that you were in a room of companions, as opposed to that you had to do combat to secure services for your child, and that you weren't kind of battling a district that was trying to withdraw services due to maybe budgeting issues, etc. And that's kind of how that's how it felt, particularly at the elementary school level for me. And then the other comment I would have is, when you have a kiddo who is in the gen ed stream but also has an IEP, it's very difficult for a student to communicate what their IEP requirements are to an individual teacher, because they have so many. And really the only way for the student to do that is to self-advocate. A lot of the time that's an incredibly heavy lift for a student of 15, 16 years of age, to self-advocate in front of all their peers, to say, I'm sorry, I was told that I didn't have to read out loud. But you have to say that in front of your peers, and you'd rather not. So I wonder, in the future, is there a way to develop a system where individual teachers could become a little bit more informed about what the accommodations are for the individual students, so that you didn't have to self-advocate quite so much in public when you're already just trying to fit in and you don't really want anyone to know that you have an IEP. So those are my comments. Our experience through the special education program was phenomenal, particularly as we got to the high school and the ACT program. And my final comment, and I will be quiet now, but our final experience was when we were in Skyline. We had a remarkable special education teacher who was there for 3 years and then had to leave the district due to housing inaffordability. And that was just devastating. We were lucky because my son was in 12th grade and we had, we'd done very well, but it was a great loss to all the students that were coming. So that's just another thing for us all to think about when we think of housing, and when our teachers can't remain in the district and give the best care they can. So thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your ability and your willingness to share that in this forum. And I want to absolutely echo that we have heard consistently from parents about the experience within IEP meetings. And really, we are thinking very deeply about how we build in that strengths-based collaborative process within the IEP. So it feels more of like a collaborative conversation as opposed to, a group of professionals presenting without that ability to come together in collaboration and partnership. So we are working very, very closely to align that experience that you had when you were at the ACT program across all of our preschool through transition age students. So I think the other piece I wanted to just briefly share with this team is we're continuing to expand inclusionary practices. So thinking deeply about what that means for students that maybe are receiving more resource or LRC1 types of services. And so thinking about what does that look like for the ability for the special education teacher to work very closely with that general education teacher to ensure accommodations, modifications, and specially designed instruction are accessible, especially as our middle school and high school students are learning about those pieces. Superintendent Talia talked about agency, advocacy, being able to navigate those pieces and how we support students through that. They haven't quite developed those skills yet, at that age. And finally, I made a note earlier in the earlier presentation about the pieces around housing, and we look forward to maybe following up as we're supporting recruitment efforts and thinking about potential partnerships.
Just quickly, are you seeing an increase in the number of IEPs and 504s? And can you tell me why?
So we are seeing an increase in need for services and specially designed instruction, and we're also seeing, as part of some of the new enrollments that come in throughout the year, also a high portion of those enrollees having IEPs or being eligible for that type of process to deliver on services to help support their learning needs. We have talked about this before. One is, we believe that we have had a strong reputation for being able to deliver in recent years, to be able to, and so I think that's attracting families to enroll their students. And we also know that coming out of COVID, there have been different gaps for our youth. And so how that gets handled when those gaps manifest in the school is to go through a process and that helps to provide them more supports to get them caught up. So what would you add to that?
We've absolutely seen a marked increase in the students that are eligible for special education services. And you talked about what are some of those potential reasons. There's multiple variables. I think we could absolutely think about, again, back to, we're speaking specifically about well-being. So when we think about some of the impacts related to, mental health, we're seeing increases there. We are seeing some pretty significant gaps related to learning loss, in general, related to COVID-19 pandemic. And then also just thinking about what does it look like for some of our very youngest learners. We talked about our commitment, our deep, deep commitment to early learning. And we think about what does that look like for some of our students that are just entering the school school system, thinking our 3, 4, 5-year-olds and some of their early developmental impacts related to language development and social emotional learning. So but we're highly committed, and the district is deeply investing in providing robust services for students that qualify.
All right, if we could, Mike and Rita, if you want to present, we can definitely extend if need be too, but go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, everyone. My name is Rita Bard. I'm the Senior Human Services Coordinator at the City of Sammamish since 2018. Good evening, City Council members, School District Board members, and City Manager. I'll be providing a very brief overview of youth mental wellness efforts by the city. So as you can see, we're very fortunate to have a very thriving community in Sammamish. And what stands out is that we're a very kid-friendly community with over half our households having children, and increasing diversity with 35% of our residents born outside of the USA. We have 3 school districts, 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, and 9 elementary schools. So the city's human service program started in 2001, and we work very closely with our regional partners in East King County, and particularly with our human service peers at the City of Issaquah. And the commission was started in 2018 to advise City Council on existing and emerging human service needs.
We had a Health and Human Services Needs Assessment done by the city, the first of its kind, and it identified 5 priority areas to focus the city's resources. Mental wellness is one of the top priority areas with an emphasis on youth mental health. Now, the city provides grants to nonprofits performing critical work in the community, and in 2023, we funded $683,000 per year for 60 programs, and that included 10 mental wellness programs that served 4,589 Sammamish residents in 2023. We also host panels and site visits to inform human service commissioners on new and emerging needs. These visits have included the Garage and hosting several panels with youth mental health experts, hearing from middle and high school counselors, Friends of Youth, Youth Eastside Services, Sammamish Youth Board, and non-profits such as Influencer Choice and the Garage. What we heard from panelists was that teens were feeling burdened and stressed from school, family, and societal pressure, overscheduling, and teens not getting enough downtime. And a quote that always resonates with me is a teen saying, "I feel more like a resume than a person." So Crosspath Counselling is located in the Sammamish Commons Park and was formed in 2018 and serves anyone who lives, works, or studies in Sammamish. The city, since 2020, funds a full-time counsellor who spends half of their time performing assessment and referral. This means any Sammamish resident can call Crosspath, and within 24 hours, the counsellor will call back and provide a very detailed intake and assessment form. If Crosspath don't have the ability to have the resource to take that community member, they will make sure that they find a counsellor that will also accept their insurance and in the area that they need. So it's a real soft handoff, and that's like a very unique counsellor that we have that serves the community. And we also make sure that we promote that through city communication on a regular basis. So we obviously, have a very diverse, population, and mental health is not a one-size-fits-all concept. Kids with immigrant parents often have a foot in 2 very different worlds. And with our diverse community, we understand the need for culturally nuanced mental health support. The Human Service Program funds nonprofits such as For Tomorrow and Indian American Community Services that have direct service and counsellors on staff. And we also fund several nonprofits, including the Circle, Central Cultural Mexicano, and Kid on Health, who are also able to refer to provide referrals to culturally sensitive counsellors. And we also fund programming with youth-led initiatives such as Crisis Connections Teen Link and NAMI's Youth Ambassador Program, as we know that peer support is vital a strategy for supporting youth mental health. So this presentation just provides a snapshot in some of the ways the Commission has worked hard to ensure that youth mental health is prioritised within the city of Sammamish. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Rita, for doing that so quickly. Does anyone have questions for Rita? Yeah, Councilmember Lamb.
I guess I'll turn around. So you mentioned culturally nuanced programs to support. What about for Asian Americans? Because, mental health issues is still kind of a taboo issue. Yeah. So what kind of services would there be for people, for students that are Asian Americans?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we only fund organizations that actually apply to us for funding, and one of them would be Kid on Health. We also work very closely, even though we don't fund them because they didn't apply for funding, was the Chinese Information Service Center, CISC. So we do work very closely with other nonprofits and culturally nuanced nonprofits, but we don't fund CISC because they didn't apply for funding, but we do fund Kid on Health. That provides those referrals.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, just thanking the school district and the school board for partnerships, not just here, but with Lake Washington as well. One of the things we had to deal with in my first term were a couple of suicides that occurred at Skyline High School. And one of the things that I learned, and I think it's important for the community to remember, is that we fund some of these programs because while many of our residents do have insurance, a lot of times kids want to get help and they don't want to have to tell their parents that they need some assistance and go through that insurance. And they also maybe, as Councilmember Farrell pointed out, you guys have counselors at school, but sometimes they don't want to do counseling at school, right? They want it to be separate. Sometimes they want it to be in school because it's more convenient. So it's just really important that we can provide the kinds of services in the kinds of places and the kinds of ways that will make it easier for people to get the help they need, because it's so hard oftentimes to ask for help and seek it. So I really appreciate the partnership that we have, and I hope we can continue to do that, and really appreciate Rita and all her work with our Human Services Commission to continue partnerships throughout the community. It is a growing problem, and something that I hope we will continue to fund and address. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, wonderful presentation. Thank you. It was great to see all the work that the city of Sammamish is doing around youth mental health. I wanted to see if you could just throw the presentation up one more time. I thought there was a really compelling number that speaks to the city of Sammamish and just how large our student population is. I know this particularly, I think it was slide 2. I think really interesting to see kid-friendly. 53% of households have children. And then you look at the King County total, and that's 28%. That just really stood out to me in terms of this being a very family-friendly, very kid-friendly community. And again, I'm really glad that we're partnering as a city and as a school district on such an important area. So thank you.
I think we should definitely do this again. This was super informative. I think we could definitely talk longer too. I know this has been super helpful, really good meeting. So thank you again, Harlan, for kind of making this happen with all of you. But yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully do it again in a year or so. And yeah, looking forward to see what happens Thursday night, sounds like. Great. Thank you all so much. Thanks.
Hey, Mayor, if I may, if I may be so bold, maybe we can take about a 10-minute break and reorient the room before we start the regular meeting back up.
All right, perfect. So if we start at 6:55, is that good? All right, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Hey, everyone, can we do a quick photo up here of the joint group before everyone walks out the door? I totally forgot about it.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Now we're going to start our regular meeting with public comment. We'll start in the room with Sam.
Good evening, council members, Madam Mayor. My name is Sam Rodabaugh. I live at 22905 Southeast 37th Street here in Sammamish. I am a longtime city resident. I am also a real estate and land use attorney that does a lot of work with the city on behalf of my clients. I live in the Sammamish Highlands neighborhood. It was platted in the 1970s. It has sprawling 1-acre lots with outdated housing stock. We have no curb, gutter, sidewalk, planter strips, limited street lights and fire hydrants, and little to no stormwater control in the Laughing Jacobs subbasin. It is a neighborhood that is lost in time. We are in the portion of the city where one half of the street, the west side of the street, is actually the city of Issaquah. And the east side of the street is the city of Sammamish. In your earlier meeting tonight with the Issaquah School Board, you learned that the plans for high school number 4 and elementary number 17 are moving forward. Those are properties literally directly across the street from our neighborhood. Now, I am of the mindset that these schools are going to happen. It sounds like that's the case. When this city performed its own traffic study 2 years ago, it confirmed that our neighborhood will be the new pass-through for traffic cutting from Issaquah Pine Lake Road over to 228th, and that we would have a 400% increase in traffic morning and night in our neighborhood. Again, our neighborhood has no infrastructure. Again, we are in the R1 zone. That was fine when the city incorporated in 1999 from unincorporated King County, but it is completely nonsensical today within a more densely packed city of Sammamish. Imagine if we had 1 acre sprawling lots surrounding Eastlake High School, Skyline High School, Eastside Catholic. Now, I'm under no illusion that the city is going to spend the funds to make our neighborhoods safe for this increase in traffic, that you'll be paying for sidewalks and all of the infrastructure that we need. But we are an island of R1 zoning. We are surrounded on the Issaquah side by high-density zones. The community facility zone that will have the new high school. We have a multifamily housing zone that's 29 units per acre across the street. And we have a mixed-use zone across the street that is commercial. And Providence Point is 7 to 8 units per acre. All of a sudden, you go across the street and become the city of Sammamish, and we have an island of R1 zoning surrounded by Pine Lake Middle School and other neighborhoods that are zoned R4, R6, R8. We are in the walk zone and are going to have the brunt of this traffic with no safety. It's time for the city to revisit R1 zoning. I do not see that it is being considered in the comprehensive plan update that will direct our community for the next 10 to 20 years.
Thank you.
And that's going to be too late by the time this school is built. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to online.
Per the new reasonable accommodation, those who have pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony. We did have one commenter who raised their hand but did not pre-register. So if you would like to give public comment at a meeting, you could, at a later meeting, you would email cityclerk@sammamish.us. Otherwise, you can also email a written comment. I see no other pre-registered commenters. Thank you.
All righty. Next up, we do have, oh, that is half of an agenda, sorry. Okay. Next up, we have our consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
All right. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you. All right, first up, we have our proclamation for National Public Works Week with Councilmember O'Farrell.
National Public Works Week, May 19 to 25. Whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th annual National Park Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canadian Public Works Association, and whereas National Public Works Week each year is the third full week in May, in a way to honor the tens of thousands of people in North America who provide and maintain the infrastructure and services collectively known as public works. And whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the residents of Sammamish, and whereas infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment and solid waste systems, public buildings and other structures and facilities essential for our residents. And whereas it is in the public interest for residents, civic leaders and children in Sammamish to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works programs in their community, and whereas public works connects us all through infrastructure and service, enhancing the quality of life of the communities these professionals serve, hence the theme of 2024, Advancing Quality of Life for All. Now, therefore, Kaylee Clark, Mayor of Sammamish, Washington, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do proclaim the week May 19 to 25, 2024, as National Public Works Week in the city of Sammamish. We call upon residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and the government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contribution they make to protecting our national health, safety, and advancing quality of life for all.
Great, thank you so much. All right, next up we have our Pride Month proclamation for June. Whereas Pride Month was established to celebrate, honor, and venerate the LGBTQ+ community, the contributions made by those individuals and the collective that have served as leaders, educators, artists, neighbors, friends, and so much more in every community across the globe. And we are all responsible for ensuring inclusion and belonging in every aspect of Sammamish, including ensuring our LGBTQ+ neighbors and allies feel welcomed, safe, and valued in our city. And Pride Month is an opportunity to recommit ourselves to equality and the celebration of our differences and similarities, to live authentically and freely, regardless of orientation or gender identity, and the ongoing fight for equality, to love freely, to have fair access to housing, income, employment, and other rights has been waged for generations by LGBTQ+ individuals and their allies, and remains an important ongoing effort that the City of Sammamish remains committed to support and ultimately achieve. Now, therefore, it be it resolved that I, Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2024 as Pride Month in the City of Sammamish, and we encourage all residents to celebrate the progress within our culture toward justice, equity, and full civic recognition for LGBTQ+ persons, and to join us in the fights that remain to be won. Okay, and then the last proclamation we have is for National Gun Violence Awareness with Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. National Gun Violence Awareness Day, June 7, 2024. Whereas there are more guns than people in the United States, and everywhere we go, the threat of gun violence follows and does not discriminate. And whereas Washington State is a national leader in the gun violence prevention movement, and whereas someone is killed by a gun every 10 hours in Washington State and every 11 minutes across the United States. And whereas every year about 900 Washingtonians are killed by guns, a rate of 11.2 per 100,000 people. And whereas 70% of gun deaths in Washington State are suicides. And whereas for 2 years in a row, gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teens. And whereas Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Washington are significantly more likely to be killed by a gun than white people are, and whereas LGBTQ+ hate crimes are on the rise, with half of the victims being killed by firearms, and whereas gun violence is a public health crisis impacting every corner of the state and continues to exacerbate with the increase of gun sales, calls to suicide and domestic violence hotlines, and gun violence by intent. And whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton was tragically shot and killed at the age of 15, and on June 7th, 2024, to recognize the 27th birthday of Hadia Pendleton, born June 2nd, 1997, people across the United States will recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day and wear orange in tribute to Hadia Pendleton and other victims of gun violence and the loved ones of those victims. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods. And orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 7th, the first Friday of June 2024, to help raise awareness about gun violence. And whereas by wearing orange on June 7, 2024, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. And whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Mayor Kaylee Clark and the City of Sammamish do hereby declare June 7th, 2024 to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the City of Sammamish. And we encourage all residents to support efforts to prevent the tragic effects and preventable of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Stewart. Next up, we have a presentation for Public Works grant updates with Audrey, Greg, and Jen.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. This evening we have 3 grants that the Public Works Department is interested in applying for. And Jen Rubinelli, our management analyst, has a quick presentation for you, and we're happy to answer any questions about the grants or the projects themselves. I am joined also tonight by Greg Samatillo, our Deputy Director of Public Works. Jen, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So, good evening, Council. Tonight we are providing an update on the Public Works Department's grant efforts. This presentation will go over 3 upcoming funding opportunities and the projects our team has identified to seek grant funding for. On the right side of the slide are the organizations who own the funding opportunities we will be discussing. So this will be a brief overview of each project and its location. So number 1, which you'll see on the map, is the Hazel Wolf Culvert. This project will replace the culvert on North Beaver Lake Drive with a fish passage culvert and will enhance fish migration and increase flow capacity, which increases or reduces the risk and frequency of road closures due to flooding. Then number 2 is the Englewood Hill Road Sidewalk Gap. This project proposes to provide a sidewalk planter strip and paved shoulder for a bike lane from 213th Place Northeast to 216th Avenue Northeast. This project will also complete the sidewalk corridor along Englewood Hill Road, providing connectivity to the King County East Lake Sammamish Trail. And then finally, we have the Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road, Endeavor Elementary School to Southeast Duthie Hill Road. This project proposes to address the current flooding issues that have resulted in road closures during severe storm events. So the first funding opportunity we'll be discussing is the King County Flood Reduction Program grant through the King County Flood Control District. This grant is for $2025. The project identified for this grant is the Hazel Wolf Culvert. Our team will be seeking construction dollars with a request of $1 million and an approximate project cost of $1.4 million. And there is no match required for this opportunity. And then next is the Washington State Department of Transportation Pedestrian and Bicycle Program Grant. These funds will be available for the 2025 to 27 biennium, beginning in July 2025. The project our team has identified is the Englewood Hill Road Sidewalk Gap. We'll be requesting pre-construction dollars, so that'll be around $500,000, and with a total project cost of about $1.1 million. There is also no match required for this opportunity. Okay, and then finally, we have the Washington State Department of Transportation Safe Routes to School program grant. Funds from this grant will also be available for the 2025 to 27 biennium beginning July 2025. The project for this one is the Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road, from Dover Elementary to Southeast Stufy Hill Road. We'll be seeking construction dollars, almost 2.5 million, with an approximate project cost of about 3.5 million. And there is also no match required for this opportunity. And with that, that concludes our presentation. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much. Deputy Mayor Howe.
Hi, I thank you for this. I'm delighted to see that you're applying for these grants. I have a question about the flood district grant in specific. My recollection on these is that they really do require that you are actually fixing a flooding situation, and that they're not that excited to help with fish culverts or passages. So is it flood? Do we qualify?
This does flood. So this particular culvert is undersized, so we would be replacing that culvert anytime that is required. We do have to make it fish passable.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Thanks, that was my question.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes, I love applying for grants. We love getting money. Couple of questions. So are all of these projects currently projects that we were planning to do, or are you coming tonight asking to sort of raise the priority since there's an opportunity to get funding?
Great question. So the Hazel Wolf project is currently on the SWIP, and that is on schedule. And so that is already identified and funded in the SWIP. So this funding would greatly help the city. If we receive funding, we can potentially look at allocating those dollars towards another project, likely a retrofit project. Let me go through the list here. Sorry. The Issaquah Falls City Road Flood Mitigation Project is also on our 24 to 29 TIP as well. And I believe some allocation from our SWIP that is scheduled and funded as well. And then the project that is not currently funded in the 24 to 29 TIP is our middle project. So the Englewood Hill Sidewalk Gap. That project was listed in last year's TIP. It was contingent on funding and that we did not get at the last round. So this would require, if we did get this funding, this would require some dollars from the city and move that project up a little bit in a queue.
Well, that's great. Love the multimodal projects. So for the Englewood Hill Road, where, I know you gave the street names, but where is that? Is that near the roundabout there, or where exactly is that?
Jen, if you're able to bring the map up, that might help.
Sorry, I was hoping there would be pictures. I like pictures in your presentation.
Too bad it's not the road bump
it's
hill.
pretty zoomed out.
Speed bump hill.
Yeah, the
Yes,
speed bump hill.
Road.
Yeah,
yes.
not that road. Yeah, not yet. Yeah.
That one's really scary to ride your bike on.
With this project opportunity, like I said, it would advance this project a little bit up higher in the queue. And we would be looking at potentially some restriping work of the road to potentially accommodate a bike lane. So we had some wonderful conversations with WASDOT about both of these funding opportunities. And part of that actually will help us write our grant applications, of course, but we're able to look at things with a little bit different lens as we approach both those projects.
I think that's great. Again, excited about all three of them, but definitely about the Englewood Hill Road one, creating that safe connection, multimodal connection down to the trail. I think if we can get that done in the next year or two, it'll be great, especially as the Mary Moore light rail stop will open up next year. It'll be a great way for people to be able to get down there and take advantage. Appreciate this. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Council, any other questions or comments? Great. This is like the most successful presentation. All good news. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We haven't received the awards yet, but thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, but you're doing it. Yeah, you're doing something. Yes. So, yeah, thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have our 2024 legislative session recap with Luke and Nick. Maybe a not a successful session for us, but super excited to hear from you both.
Oh, there we go. Short but succinct analysis of the 2024 legislative session. And council may recall, if going back a few years, Mike Slug always did a great job of our priorities for the city, making them all in the acronym SAM. So I tried to start all of the bullet points on this first page with S's as an homage to that graphical presentation. This was a short session, and just as a reminder to the council, under the state constitution, the legislature alternates between, in even-numbered years, short 60-day legislative sessions, and in odd-numbered years, long 105-day legislative sessions. This was the short one, which should mean fewer bills and less activity, but there was still plenty of bills and plenty of activity. There were almost 1,200 bills introduced, and there were more than that many that had carried over from the past year, this being the second year of the biennium, and about 340 bills passed. So there were still plenty of activity, even though it was a short session. This was a session of the supplemental budgets, and as a reminder, in the long session, the state puts together its biennial operating transportation and capital budgets, and traditionally the supplemental budgets are more along the lines of refinements and modifications. There can be exceptions with extraordinary events like COVID or the Great Recession, but normally it is movement on the edges as opposed to starting from scratch. I put shrunken expectations in here because every year, every budget writer, regardless of party, rural, urban, always starts a conversation by telling you, usually while they're wringing their hands, that this is a really, really tough year for the budget. I think they really meant it on the capital budget side, at least this year, because we were coming down from the infusion of federal money that occurred as part of the BIL, ARPA, and IRA, and plus there were greater than expected amounts of school construction responsibilities for the state. So that did leave less for capital budget than that would normally be the case, even in a short session with a supplemental budget. So that reduced expectations even further. And finally, the final S, the 6 initiatives that all the initiatives to the legislature that all qualified in December, right before the session, cast a long shadow over this year's legislative session. So with each of those 6, the legislature was presented with the option of either adopting that initiative, of offering an alternative along with that initiative to the voters, or simply letting the initiative go by itself to the voters. And the first 3 mentioned here, Initiative 2081 on parental rights, 2111 on banning state and local income taxes, and 2113 reasonable suspicion standard for police pursuits, the legislature did adopt those 3 into law during the 2024 session. And I'll dig into more later on the 3 that they're passing along to the voters, but those 3 are Initiative 2109, repealing the state capital gains tax, 2117, repealing the Carbon Commitment Act, and 2124, creating an opt-out for the WellCares long-term care program. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Nick.
Thanks, Luke. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Nick Federici, the other half, the lesser half of your junior half. There we go. Of your lobbying tag team in Olympia. As you indicated, Mayor, it was not a great year. It wasn't a great year in general, and it wasn't a great year for many of our priorities. Though they all got serious consideration and a lot of discussion. The one that I want to start off with is, and your Public Works folks just talked about the Endeavor Elementary project. I know you met earlier with the Issaquah School Board. I think this one is really ripening in its possibilities. As Luke said, this year was short year, supplemental budget when they're sort of filling in gaps as opposed to doing big new things. The earlier that we you're able to identify those priorities for the legislature, the better off we are in terms of being able to build some critical mass among the legislators to be able to do that. Particularly Representative Callan worked hard on this. She's the vice chair of the House Capital Budget Committee. To be honest, there was a lot of this that went on in Olympia in terms of, well, no, this is about flooding. No, this is about climate. No, this is capital. No, this is transportation. No, this is schools. I think the earlier that if you reaffirm this as a priority for you, getting this on the attention of Representative Callan and other local legislators this summer or fall, I think we have a very good chance of being able to make some solid progress on that. We discussed this with the three delegations on December 12th. A number of you came down for AWC City Action Days in February. We had good conversations there. And as the session went on, we accumulated support from Eastside Fire and Rescue, from the Issaquah School Board, from the PTSA, but we came up short on that. And hopefully lining those ducks up earlier will allow us a greater chance for success on that. Second item, supporting progressive and realistic city revenue options. It's an election year. Legislators don't like making difficult or controversial decisions in an election year. I'm sure that'll shock you. Therefore, there were not any new revenues put on the table, but there was a lot of discussion that we were involved in around progressive revenue options, including real estate excise tax, real estate transfer tax, as well as changing the 1% property tax cap. I was fairly confident the property tax cap was going to be lifted this last year, but Governor Inslee had some concerns about it at the last minute because of the initiatives going to the ballot, and so that fell by the wayside. I'm optimistic that, again, if this is one of the things you prioritize, we can help push this across the finish line next year. Local climate action initiatives, a lot of money from the Climate Commitment Act. Luke will talk about the initiative to repeal that, proposing to repeal that. About $2 billion distributed for different projects across the state, with a pretty tight lens in terms of prevention or amelioration of climate change. But that money got peanut buttered across operating budget, capital budget, transportation budget. So no big investments from that in anything particular for us, but sort of a little bit for everybody, or a little bit for a lot of different things. Excuse me. The REWRAP Act, to change the way the state does recycling, I know is a priority to a number of the members of the council. We came pretty close on that. We were part of working with both the environmental community as well as other cities that were supportive of this. About halfway through session, a bunch of alternatives that I think confused a lot of the issue and muddied the waters around that came forward. I think that that's going to continue to be the case. I was on a call last week with folks from the environmental community about this, trying to game plan what happens next, and try to figure out how that'll get revised. So we'll keep you apprised on that. And the last item for me, affordable housing. There were many pieces of legislation to sort of override local control on affordable housing. All of those fell by the wayside, including the one that would have required lot splitting and increasing where development can happen. A lot of funding for affordable housing was the biggest I think takeaway. $60 million in operating budget funding, $127.5 million for the state's housing trust fund, which brought the trust fund up over this last 2 years to $527.5 million, almost $1.5 billion over the last 4 years for affordable housing, and we're still falling behind. But those were the major things. And then a bill that we were involved in as well, House Bill 2160, that involved creating incentives and requirements for more density and more affordable housing near fixed transit, both high capacity transit as well as fixed rail, like Sound Transit System.
And next, we'll turn to the multimodal transportation improvements. And the transportation budget has actually been under stress for its own reasons, as gas taxes become a declining revenue source, both as vehicles become more efficient and people are driving electrical vehicles that don't use any gasoline. So there's challenges in the transportation budget for separate reasons than from some of the other budgets. There was some increase in funding and transportation almost exclusively from the Climate Commitment Act dollars. The two biggest chunks that saw increases in the transportation budget were a little over $200 million for new ferry vessels and the electrification of existing ferry vessels, and also about $40 million for private sector incentives to provide some infrastructure for electrical vehicle chargers and hydrogen utilization for vehicles. And so nothing that benefited us directly in that realm, but that's where the relatively modest amounts of increases went. I know the full funding Washington Public Schools is very important to the council, and I'll just note that for a short session supplemental budget with shrunken expectations, there were some decent increases in some select areas of the K through 12 budget for the state. First, I'll point out that for paraeducators and non-instructional personnel, there was a $71.8 million increase to provide additional staffing for those types of school personnel. There was an additional $45 million to provide more funding for free meals for school children, and an additional $43.6 million for what is called MSOC, maintenance, supplies, and operating costs, kind of the overhead sort of education that can get lost in the shuffle sometimes. So for the type of budget we had, some substantial increases, though not as much as we expect to see next year in a full biennial budget.
Just to tag on to the school district funding piece, that is going to be a major priority to the legislature, and what's something that, again, remains unfunded or underfunded, special education. I don't know what the situation is with the Issaquah School District, but many jurisdictions are facing mass layoffs of instructional and other staff. That's something that the legislature is going to be asked to do something about. Governor Inslee is currently in the process of negotiating collective bargaining agreements with state employees as well as K-12 employees on a statewide basis. The bill for that is expected to be significant, perhaps a couple $2 billion. So those will all be major priorities for the legislature to make up funding, as well as something that there's increasing political pressure around. Turning to the AWC legislative priorities, several $100 million for both new construction of and funding for Medicaid services in the behavioral health system, particularly some mobile outreach teams. Senator Malka Dingra from the 45th District, who represents part of Sammamish, very involved in that. She's sort of the fairy godmother of the behavioral health system in the Senate, and really a major mover and shaker there. She got those mobile units for kids funded. In addition, she ran legislation, Senate Bill 5359, that allows, you may have heard of 23-hour facilities that allow temporary placement, not residential placement. They left kids out of that last year when they enacted that, so now kids can receive those services as long as it's separate from adult services, so there's no predation involved or problems there. Again, Senator Dingra passed Senate Bill 6228, which requires insurance plans to pre-authorize a 15-day stay up front for inpatient treatment. There's been situations in the past where people have had difficulty, particularly Medicaid, for folks on Medicaid, of getting those authorized and ending up with big bills from their insurance company for that treatment. And so hopefully some of the days of that are past. Luke?
Yes, and the second of the four bullets there on the review of the AWC, Association of Washington Cities 2024 legislative priorities, is public safety. And just to go back for a second, probably the public safety issue got the most prominence during the legislative session was the initiative dealing with returning the standard for police pursuits to reasonable suspicion, and the legislature did adopt that. That was Initiative 2113. In addition, they also did some smaller sorts of things in the area of public safety. There was actually legislation sponsored by Senator Mullet that would have put in state statute an elimination of a 25% match requirement for local jurisdiction when they send new police officers to the basic law enforcement academy. Right now, there's a 25% match requirement. The legislature didn't pass that bill, but in the operating budget for this supplemental year, they did fund that 25%. So hopefully a flag has been placed in the ground, and it's not a lot of money, but it's a nice gesture from the state to stop requiring that match when we're all trying to incentivize the recruitment and retention of police officers as much as possible. Also, I'll note House Bill 1530 allows green card holders to serve as police officers and prosecutors going forward, and Senate Bill 6157 similarly allows DACA recipients to serve as police officers, firefighters, and other civil service positions. So trying to find some new pathways to recruit new young talent to those positions. Third bullet point here is ensure basic infrastructure funding, and it's been a long-standing concern of the legislature, of many legislators and many local governments, that the Public Works Assistance Account, which is also known as the Public Works Trust Fund, frequently on a bipartisan, bicameral basis gets swept, raided, whatever verb you'd like to use, by legislators when they experience budget challenges. Fortunately, no more of that, I should say, that did not occur to any additional degree this past session. So we were successful in holding the line on ensuring that piece of basic infrastructure funding.
Thank you, Luke. The 1% property tax cap we already discussed briefly, so we'll move on to unless there's questions about any of those issues, we'll move on to the next slide. You may have heard that there are elections happening this year. You may have gotten lots of emails and texts while we were standing here from people about that. One of the major issues impacting the elections is the redistricting process. A Voting Rights Act lawsuit was brought by Latinx advocates in Central Washington against the state for underrepresenting communities of color in Central Washington. As a result, the two Yakima and surrounding districts, the 14th and the 15th, got radically altered to become much more blue, for lack of a better term, about 7.5% more Democratic in their previous performance. But it's also had an impact locally. The 5th legislative district, to countervail that change, became about 2% more red in its historical performance. That's using the 2022 election results as a benchmark for the potential. So as a result, that could result in some tighter elections here locally. As one of the impacts, they basically traded out North Bend to Central Washington, and the 5th district got, I think, Black Diamond and Enumclaw as part of that trade-off. Changes in the local legislative delegation. Senator Mullet from the 5th legislative district running for governor. For his open Senate seat, Representative Ramos, who's an incumbent, and former Representative Chad Magendas are running for that. So there'll be an open seat that used to be inhabited by Representative Ramos in that district. There are no sort of structural changes. People could get defeated, incumbents, but at this point, there's nobody else who is sort of up or out in that process. Though Senator Monka Dingra from the 45th district is running for Attorney General. Her Senate seat is not up for re-election, so if she gets elected Attorney General, there would be an appointment process for her seat. If she does not get elected Attorney General, she'll return to her position in the Senate. Potential for supermajorities. The Democrats are 2 seats short in the House and 1 seat short in the Senate of supermajorities. Of one form of supermajority requires a 60% vote in order to enact bond legislation, in order to issue bonds. So Democrats are 2 seats short of that in the House and 1 seat short in the Senate. To do constitutional amendments, it requires a 2/3 vote. They're well short of that, and it's not anticipated that there would be any gains to that extent. But hearing about a potential Democratic supermajority is something that you may hear about in the media or from your friends and colleagues. as it says here, on the ballot this year, all of the state representative positions for your local delegation, Senator Mullet's seat, as well as Senator Lisa Wellman in the 41st District is up for re-election. The governor's race has, happy to talk about details if you want, has two strong candidates on the Democratic side and two strong candidates on the Republican side. That primary for that is August 6th. Lieutenant Governor race, Lieutenant Governor Heck is, as the incumbent, is there facing some challengers. Attorney General, one major Republican, and Senator Moncadingra and former U.S. Attorney Nick Brown on the Democratic side running for that. Commissioner of Public Lands, former Public Lands Commissioner Hillary Franz, first was running for governor, now is running for Congress to represent me down in Tacoma and the Olympic Peninsula. There's quite the Donnybrook going on there with multiple candidates on both sides of the partisan spectrum vying for that. Insurance Commissioner race, longtime Insurance Commissioner Mike Kreidler is retiring. 48th District Senator from Bellevue, Patty Kuderer is running on the Democratic side. Republican Senator Phil Fortunato from, southeast of here in rural King and Pierce County is running on the Republican side. They are perhaps the most progressive and the most conservative members of the legislature. Should be an interesting race. In the other federal and statewide offices, there's not a lot of controversy there. Nobody retiring. State Treasurer Pellicciati, State Auditor Pat McCarthy running for re-election, and a range of folks running against them. So, but as you've certainly seen in the media, the real action is in the conversations about redistricting and what happens with those majorities in the legislature and who's going to be in those statewide offices.
And finally, I'll move quickly through these so we can address any questions the council might have. Those three initiatives that will definitely be on the ballot this upcoming November are Initiative 2109, repealing the capital gains tax. And as a reminder, in 2021, the legislature created a 7% net capital gains tax on the sale or exchange of long-term capital assets by individuals over $250,000, and initiative with the proceeds of that going to educational purposes. Initiative 2117, repealing the Climate Commitment Act, and Nick has talked a little bit already about how the funding from that source is used, and that is that legislation also from 2021 set a limit on carbon emissions, a limit that declines over time, and the state auctions off quarterly allowances to emit CO2, and that is where the funding comes from that Nick discussed earlier. Initiative 2124, opt out of WellCare's long-term care program. This was a program that was created in 2019, which is not yet fully implemented, and there was a one-time ability to opt out if you already had existing long-term care coverage, but the timeline under that original bill has passed, and this would create a ongoing ability to opt out. And finally, those were all initiatives to the legislature. The deadline for initiatives to the people every year is right around the 4th of July. It varies a little bit by year, so there's still time for more initiatives to the people to make it onto the ballot this November, but we won't know for sure until the 4th of July timeframe whether that's the case or not. And with that, happy to address any questions the council might have.
Thank you so much. Deputy Mayor Howe.
Thanks, Nick and Luke, and thank you for your help and representation in Olympia. I mean, we'd still be in Olympia lost, looking for the right room if you guys weren't helping us. I already know that. In order to be more effective, I had a question about what you said, Nick. I just wasn't sure if I understood you. It sounded like, should we pick, like for Endeavor, pick flood, pick school, pick road, pick one, or is it still the right idea to spread it?
Because By the time we met with our legislator, with your legislative delegation on December 12th last year, a lot of them already had their agendas locked in, either mentally or practically. I think the sooner that we're, and therefore we were subject to this thing, not by the legislators, but just by the process as a whole. I think that if that remains a priority to this council, I think the best thing would be to continue staying the course on that and reaffirm that so that we can avoid some of that runaround that we got last year, and so we can go to your existing delegation and the folks who are running to represent you with that as soon as possible, and so we can start digging down with their assistance in the process to figure out how do those either. Are there chunks of money we can apply for, like the grant process that was spoken of? How do we braid together that funding, and what may come from what, so that it's a package instead of, oh, you can't. Don't stop here. You can't have any flood funding because that's already spoken for through this long process that already went into place, et cetera. So I think the sooner that again, if that remains a priority, to focus on that, then we can have that iterative process more flexibly and effectively than we were able to during the legislative session when we were under the gun.
And one aspect of your question I'll address is, I think getting started early will help us to figure out, as we're talking to legislators, maybe there's one of them for whom the flood argument makes a lot of difference, and others for whom the education, and others for whom transportation, because this is one of those unique projects that has a lot of different benefits to it. And we do want to make sure that we don't minimize any one of them, but maybe figure out which is the strongest lever with any of our local legislators, is what I would suggest.
Well, I had thought that safety was going to be a hook for us, but it wasn't a strong enough one. So when you say early, I guess that's where I could use the guidance. So I'm trying to understand, what is early, what is the time frame, by when should we have our legislative agenda sewn up so that we know what we want to talk about, and by when do we know who we want to talk to? Because that was the other question I had was, we did glancing blows with some of them because we were pulling them out of a session to have a quick chat. But for the most part, many of our representatives are engaged and are happy to talk to us. Not all of them as much, not all of them, but for the most part. So how can I take advantage of the fact they're running for re-election?
Well, two things. At a staff level, we already have on the books a meeting, I think, in early June to start looking ahead towards the 2025 session with your internal staff and with Nick and I. And I don't think there's a magic date, but to me, if you can get something ahead of the fourth quarter, and I know it's still election season, but by September-ish, that for at least having sort of introductory sorts of conversations or a deeper level of conversation, that puts you ahead of the game for, hopefully by the time we always have our December get together, which is a good idea and we should keep doing it, but hopefully that will be cementing the ask in their minds and, making sure that we've laid that groundwork in advance rather than it becoming kind of an introductory meeting for them.
Because where I think we're going to need help, and not to cut you off, Nick, is just that we've already made the ask for Endeavor. I don't know how to make it better. So
sometimes it is just repetition,
Okay.
and taking advantage of the fact that they've told us it was a tough budget year. Okay, we got it. We've been patient. It's become even more of a priority. And Deputy Mayor Howe, I wanted to address when we chatted briefly on Saturday at the groundbreaking ceremony. You asked about the Maple Valley
How
project.
come they got $5 million?
And I was able, it's a small family of lobbyists. I talked to the lobbyists for Maple Valley. That money was actually first procured in 2022 as part of the big transportation budget from that year. So it was a reappropriation of some of that $5 million. So it was initially gathered at a time when it was a little bit easier to get the money, but nonetheless, they did a good job back in 2022 of obtaining that money.
Thank you for that follow-up.
You bet.
I'll just add I guess, usual visual to Luke's analysis. The farther our run up to the deeper pool that we get to jump in this year in terms of funding, the better we are. We had, as you said, several glancing blows. We met with all the delegation, as did you when you were down in February, but being able to sit down with each one of them for an hour with the staff and with some of you and us at length here in town makes a huge difference, right? And to be able to give them paper and to be able to answer all those questions instead of, we have their attention for 15 minutes in February and then, somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And sometimes it just gets lost in the rush.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you for being here. I wanted to say your presentation in black and white, it's actually kind of nice to see one that's in black and white. I look at like designy things all day and it's kind of refreshing.
It's easy for us because unlike Mike, I think we're pretty good with words, but not quite so great with graphics. So it's easy to keep it simple.
Mike said, could you do some slides? And we said, slides?
I had a question about the cap gains and particularly cap gains repeal effort. What are you hearing out in the Hill? Only because I see a lot of people like at like Salmon Days and the festivals, and they have tables, and they're spreading a lot of misinformation. And one, what are you hearing? And two, will there be an effort to to counteract all of that?
There is an effort. There's a joint effort across the three initiatives, just as the group of folks, Let's Go Washington, I think they were called, were the folks that brought forward all 6 of those initiatives, including the 3 that are on the ballot. There's a group, Defend Washington, that is coordinating the campaigns around those 3 initiatives, but each one also has its own separate staffing and funding. I had briefing today from one of the pollsters that was involved in that campaign, and it's not public yet, but I would be happy to have a sidebar with you to discuss what I learned from those polling results. And I will just say that in general, as somebody who has written and helped pass initiatives in the past, you like to go into a campaign with about 60% or more approval because you're going to attrit. And if folks are confused about initiatives, they generally vote no because, as somebody who had lots of Catholic school teaching, sins of omission seem to be less offensive to people than sins of commission. And so they vote no when they're confused. All 3 of the initiatives are well below the 50% mark, much less the 60% mark right now.
And I'll add that for Initiative 2109 in particular, I think both sides, without taking either side, both sides will have plenty of resources to make their cases to the voters. I think that much is clear based on the data available so far.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap this meeting up soon, or the mayor is not going to have a voice left. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I think it's very obvious that we do better when we have Sam, Mike. I'm just saying. No, that was really helpful. I might ask, and if there's no objection, that we ask the city manager to help us convene our committee for our priorities over the summer. So you guys are going to meet, it sounds like, with staff in June. Maybe we should convene our committee in July and August with the hopes of bringing the priorities to get confirmed early in September so we can get that locked in. Sorry, what's that? Oh, okay. And then, so unless you have any concerns about that, Mr. City Manager, I think that would be super helpful. And then, Oh, I wanted to let folks know that the initiative that passed about parental rights, one of our representatives, Senator Lisa Wellman, about a year or two ago, actually pulled together from all of the existing state laws a K through 12 parental Bill of Rights. So if anybody's interested, they can go do a search on K through 12 Parental Bill of Rights. Everything that was in that initiative is actually already codified in state law. So that's very exciting. But the booklet that was pulled together is actually quite helpful for parents so that they know what things they have the rights to, you know, kind of pull their children out of, et cetera. And then on the capital gains, the limit goes up every year. So when the capital gains tax was first passed, it was only applicable to those who had capital gains, the gains, not the total sale, but the gains over 250,000. It's now up over 263,000, I think, and every year, just like other things, that limit goes up for anyone who's interested. It affects about 7,000 households, and if you're counting, there are 2,979,272 households in the state of Washington. So it affects a very small number of folks, but that funding is for education, which, as we heard earlier, is super critical. So yeah, thank you, and we look forward to having those conversations early and often. And I would reiterate, I think, from what I've seen, many things that get through the legislature require repeated attempts. So I think, Deputy Mayor Howell, in terms of our asks, we've had, even in the past, where we've had the same ask on our agenda for a couple years in a row, and it just takes that sort of momentum to get it across the finish line. So it's not necessarily that it was a bad ask or it needs to be better, it just needs to be early and often. Thank you, guys.
Councilmember Gupta.
Thank you for the presentation. Especially talking about convening a committee over this summer, do you have any initial guidance for us on how we might prepare as a city for those ballot measures? Because I imagine the asks that we make are going to be significantly different based on the outcome of those ballot measures and the funding that will be available. Do you have any guidance for us there?
Yeah, I think one of the values of, we talked about how this is a project that can be argued from different spaces, the safety, the flooding, the education. And it is possible that some of the major source of funding for the Climate Commitment Act could disappear, depending on how the voters decide that particular measure. So I think it probably makes sense for us to have some options available. And you know, we usually tell legislators that we're not too proud to accept money from any pot that you think is appropriate. The main thing is to get this project funded. But it is good to remind them of the different alternatives, because I remember distinctly telling a couple legislators earlier this year that, you know, there's some good arguments that this would be available for some of this Climate Commitment Act, and it was like a light bulb went on with some of them. Oh, you're right, that is, you know, there's the argument about, you know, severe weather events causing more flooding in the future, and preparing against that would be an appropriate use of those dollars if they are still there. So to your question, Councilmember, I think we need to present legislators with some alternatives to the extent we can, and hopefully we'll have multiple alternatives and multiple paths forward to success.
Thank you very much.
Great. Anything else from council? Awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I don't often say this, but I think a podcast would be great from you. So.
We both have excellent voices and faces.
Yes, there you go. Faces for podcasts. Great. Thank you both so much. All righty. Mike, new business ordinance. I'm not going to read that out, but yeah.
It's a long title.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Good evening, Council. Mike Sugg, Supervising Management Analyst. I'll try and make this quick. In your packet this evening is an ordinance concerning for-hire transportation services. And in this context, when we say for-hire transportation services, what we're talking about is services like Uber, Lyft, and taxis. It does not apply to non-commercial enterprises such as ride shares, van pools, employer shuttles, buses, that kind of thing. So since 2002, the city has delegated the authority to King County to license and regulate for-hire transportation services within our city, as well as 16 other cities, including Seattle and the Port of Seattle. And it is at no cost to the city that they provide this service to us. The county recently updated and modernized its regulations relating to these services and created a more regional licensing model. It also improved alignment with the City of Seattle's program by reducing the complexity of navigating a similar but slightly different program to what the City of Seattle had. So there's some alignment there. So in your packet tonight, the ordinance is available as Exhibit 1, and it would do two things. The first is adopt by reference the new and updated sections of the King County Code into the city's municipal code. And then it would also authorize the city manager to enter into a new ILA with the county so that they can continue to regulate these businesses within Sammamish. So staff's recommendation tonight is for council to adopt the ordinance. And with that said, I will turn it back to the mayor if there are any questions.
All right, council. Do you have a question? Oh, you're ready to vote? Okay. Anybody else? All right, Councilmember Stewart.
I move that we approve the ordinance as titled and written in the packet.
Second.
Right, moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? Great. All those in favor of ordinance 2024-565, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Great. Thanks, Mike. That was super easy. Yeah.
Thanks, Council.
All right, Scott, City Manager report.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick items. I want to invite everyone to our Pride event on Wednesday, June 5th. It starts at 5:30. We're trying to do it late enough that we can get folks from school to be able to get there in time and to get folks to go home first. So 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, June 6th, as part of the farmers market. We'll have some booze there for our partners, including the YMCA, the library, Eastside Pride, and others. And so we'd like to invite everyone to come out and join us. We will be separately this year, we will be posting the Pride Progress flag on June 1st, and that will not be part of the celebration this year. It will already be up, but we didn't want to lose that first week in essence. So looking forward to everyone joining us for that. I also wanted to share out that July 4th, I know it seems like kind of a long ways away, but it's not, is our big festival for the fireworks, and it is the last opportunity for those that want to do the video time capsule. Rich, who is our contract videographer, will have his setup there, and folks can come in, and that will be the last opportunity. After that, we'll close it off, and then Rich has some amazing editing to do to get it ready for our celebration event on August 16th. So encourage everyone to come out and provide their memories of Sammamish. I think it's shaping up really nicely, and we've had some good turnout at our events to date. So want to invite everyone to do that as well. Quick reminder that next Monday is Labor Day, so City Hall will be closed. Sorry, Memorial Day, thank you. I always do that. I will forever do that. It's a Monday. Memorial Day, and City Hall will be closed in remembrance. I was going to get the remembrance part right, just the wrong holiday. And then I just want to say a quick thank you to all the staff and for council for joining us on Saturday. It was quite cold, not quite what we were hoping for, but it was a nice groundbreaking event, and it was nice to have our elected partners out with us to share that. So I want to say thank you to everyone for that. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Councilmember Stewart.
I just want to say I hope people will still join us, but there will be booths, not booze. So you kind of got us a little excited there, Scott. So please still join us, but I want to set expectations appropriately.
All right, does anyone else have a report? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn?
All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, good night, everybody. Thank you.